Okay, and here we are, and we are back at the Chris Ott channel, and this is part 4 of our series on the subject of and causation. Now, I want to say a little more about knowledge and its relation to perception. First of all, I said that all we can really say with absolute certainty, where we can't possibly be wrong, since our perceptions can be wrong, at least theoretically, is that things appear as they do. So to give an illustration of that so you can picture that better, imagine Neo from The Matrix before he's been woken up and told that his life is just a illusion being fed to him from a computer into his spinal cord. Okay, so he still believes that he's walking around in a real world, and all these things are in fact the real world. And he would have no way actually to even question that, since no one has ever told him. And however, so if Neo, is looking at his papers and he was to declare, "I'm looking at these papers at my desk. These are real. These are real papers." Well, we would know, having seen the movie, that he would have been wrong. Okay, because those were just a simulation of real papers, actually. However, and that would go for anything that he would say from his experience. It would be, he wouldn't really know it because it could be wrong, okay? That's what the movie's sort of trying to get across, is that your perceptions can deceive you, or a deceiver could deceive you. And that's an old idea. And but our point is that perception is not by itself sufficient to warrant certainty. However, there is one thing that perception does allow us to warrant, and that is that things appear as they do. So if Neo were to sit at his desk and say, "Well, here are these papers that I'm supposed to work at my desk today. Now, I don't know whether those papers are real or not, or even exactly what that would mean. However, one thing I know for absolute certain is that it appears like these papers are in front of me. And it appears like I'm a person sitting at a desk in a room looking at some papers. And that's how it appears." Now that is true, because he hasn't made any further inference about what he can derive from that experience. But stating that the experience is happening in the way that it is a fact. And it's incontrovertible. But that's all that we can really know with certainty. Okay? Everything else is theoretical after that. However, our theories do begin with that experience and explaining why things appear as they do. Okay? Now that I've said the one thing that we can know for certain, I want to talk about another aspect of knowledge and how another kind of knowledge that we have, the less rigorous form, the one that I talked about earlier where it's good enough to get by. My wife told me that I have a meeting at 9, I'm driving in the car, I'm sufficiently confident that there is, that I'm not going to worry about it. It's always worked in the past, I'm not going to worry about it. Okay? I don't have absolute certainty that there's a meeting. Okay? But I don't need absolute certainty for all practical purposes. That's more in the realm of philosophical academic thought, the idea of absolute certainty. But from a day to day, we don't need that. And people who think that they have it, well, they just haven't, they don't know. Nobody ever explained all this to them. But aside from absolute certainty, we're all filled with millions and millions of beliefs. Okay? Some of them are very strong beliefs, and we would even ordinarily say we know them, but we've already said and shown how we don't know them in that strongest sense. But in a practical sense, we know them. Like I would say, I know that there's a country called England, and that it is an island, and that its capital is London, and it has 60 million people. Okay? But from a philosophical point of view, those are beliefs. That's good enough. They're my beliefs. Now, where do beliefs come from? Believe it or not, beliefs don't usually... Some beliefs come from memories I have of having gone and looked. Okay? I'll tell you, my car is white because the last time I looked at it, it was white. Okay? But that England is an island, I know that because I've read it and I've looked at maps. And those, I should say something about that, although it's a little off the subject. You can't actually observe with your eyes normally that England is an island. If you flew an airplane over England, you wouldn't see the shores. England's too large, and the airplane doesn't fly high enough. You'd have to go up into the space station, and you might be able to see that England is an island. But very few have had that privilege. For most of us, we rely upon testimony. And how it was determined that it was an island was not through sense perception, but through alone, but by people circumnavigating the island with nautical instruments and charting along the way. It's called, they created a map, the art of cartography. You could go around the island with a compass and you could make marks and you could create a map, and then you'd see, it's an island. You'd have to analyze your data. But your data would be from sense experience. Now, what I'm trying to get at here is that even though most of our beliefs are not derived from our own experience, but 99% of them are from testimony. We learned them in school, we saw it in a documentary, we read it in a book, if you would trace back where that knowledge began, it does begin in human perception. Okay, so if 99% of what we say we believe is based on testimony, all that is testimony of past instances of experience. Okay. Now, as I'm about to say something else to show you that all that we claim to know is rooted in perception. Okay? But before I do that, I have to remind from the first segment of this series that what we mean by perception is we're using the word in its original classical sense of gathering knowledge or gathering information. But that can be a gathering, it doesn't have to be through the five senses, okay? It can also be gathering through thinking. So let's say I'm looking at all that information, all that data I've collected while I was tracing, the perimeter of the island, and I'm about to realize that England is an island. Well, I have to do some thinking about that. I have to look at those and I analyze them and I use some geometry and stuff and things. But in this broad sense of perception, we include our perception of our thoughts. Okay? So I only know that I can only analyze this data in my experience of my analyzing. Okay? To show you a simpler example where you have to use the broad sense of the word perceive to grasp that everything that we know of it's grounded in perception of some sort. I just mentioned that I would say I know my car is white, and I said I based that on the fact that I remember last time I looked at it, it was white. However, notice I'm not basing it on my looking at it right now. So my confidence that my car is white is not based on the fact that I'm perceiving with my eyes my car. Okay? It's based on the fact that when I reflect on my memories, I perceive that I have a memory of my car being white. So when we talk about basing things on perception, 99% of the time we mean testimony, our perception of somebody telling us, or a book or a map. But in the other instances, even the ones where it's based on my own direct, I went and observed, it's still based on my perception of my memory of a bygone past perception by sense. So it's really not sense perception, it's mental perception of my memories. Okay? And you have to kind of include that and then tracing back. So if I say, I believe that Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Well, that's based on my perception of a book. And the writer of that book based it on his perception of his memory of a lecture or his notes from a lecture. And then that is traced back to somebody's perception of their memory of watching Caesar cross the Rubicon. Okay? So it's like I perceive testimony of a perception of another testimony, which is of a perception, which is of another testimony, which is of a perception of a memory of a perception. It's like that. But it all fundamentally is all belief is based, is traceable to perception, all of it. Okay, even spiritual knowledge. Okay, that's the whole idea of the sixth sense or enlightenment. Is that you perceive the truth. So it's always perception. The rest is hearsay. But hearsay is perception. So now, there's one last thing I need to say here. If you took a baby, this sounds horrible, but if you took a baby and it was just born and it couldn't see yet or anything, and you put it in an isolation tank and you hooked it up to a feeding tube and an oxygen tube, and you kept it in isolation in an isolation tank, and it never perceived anything at all. Okay? And then you released it from this isolation tank when it was 25 years old. Okay? What would that person know? Nothing. Nothing at all. The person wouldn't have even thought, because he hadn't heard language and watched language used so that he could develop inner dialogue. He would have no memories because he had never perceived anything. There would be absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, that baby would die, which is what's cruel about this. So all knowledge is based on perception. So now we have the 2 points. All we really fundamentally know is that things appear as they do, and all that we believe, even imperfectly, we believe because of perception. There isn't anything outside of perception in our mind. Even if I theorize that there was an imperceivable theoretical thing called Sharkety-Plark, and I don't have a picture of it because it's it's not that kind of thing. Well, Sharkety-Plark is a theory, that I perceive in my mind, where I thought it up. Okay, so you cannot escape your experience. And you can't find the cause of your experience in your experience. Now, that's kind of a deep thought. You might have to think about that. But if you went looking for the cause, what is the cause of this appearance? Well, if I look into the appearance, that can't be the cause, because that is the effect I'm looking for the cause for. Now, in the next section, we're gonna talk now again about cause. And before I go on, I'm going to have to help the viewer to understand why cause is important and what we need to find the cause of. Okay. Fundamentally, it's going to be, we're going to seek the cause of that experience, about the cause of that appearance, that from which is all that we know. Okay, we can't seem to seek the cause for something else because there isn't anything else, at least that we know about, or that we could ever even conceive of. So we are going to seek the cause of this, and by this I mean this appearance, all this. How did this happen? How did I, and I look down and I appear to be in it. Where do I come from? Where does this come from? What am I doing here? How did this happen? Okay. That's the end of this segment.